Hi there, welcome to part two of No, this is really my last Gnostic video for this channel. Um, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, come part 27, and we'll come on to that later. Um, I've said somewhere before on this channel that this world is not created for us or for any organic sentient beings, but for the billions of demons and thousands of orders of demons that exist in what I would term the demon sphere. So, hence, this world equals the demon sphere. And uh, the thing about this is that, and for each of these things that the demons do collectively and individually, and by species, I suppose you might say. Um, they cause a defocusing or a dispersal of the mental focus, a certain fickleness as we go from one challenge to another challenge, or one success to another, or one failure to another. We're always battered this way and that by the fickleness of our consciousness, which is something that the demons rely upon to gain access to the what one might call psychic energy, on which the little critters feed. And but taking the demon sphere, taking this whole figure, these four elements here, and the fifth one here, they're all really not to be sort of separated too much, but in fact, only considered separate for the sake of argument. They really act as all at one thing. And in a sense, I was inspired by this thought experiment because of thinking about parents, my parents, or your parents, parents in general, or maybe you're a parent. And unbeknownst to you, unconsciously or consciously, you're doing a lot of things to your kids, whether you know it or not. For example, there is intimidation, which leads to fear. And I suppose we're talking about dysfunctional parents here, but even the functional ones to a degree. Intimidation, we're talking about any kind of authority, which is always based on fear, ultimately the threat of violence, or the actual carrying out of violence. So we have here one of the F demons, which is fear. In fact, the main F demon of this world, which is fear. You rule by fear. You divide and conquer. You intimidate. So intimidation is one of the things that the demons rely upon to gain access to your psyche, as one might say. And of course, the ultimate is that they feed on that psyche. And I hear that this causes depression or forlornness, an old fashioned word for depression. But in actual fact, I think what really happens is that you become forlorn, or you become depressed, as a result of exposure to the demon sphere. And it's upon that depression that the demons feed primarily, on the psychic energy. So feeding is what it's really all about. And then if we come down here, of course, the opposite of intimidation, real or actual or imagined, producing fear, is, of course, indulgence. So you're indulged by the demons, and by your parents, and by authority, and by the consumerist society we live in. And that creates fantasy, another F demon. And by fantasy, I mean not exactly reverie, or certainly not meditation, but fantasy, which is liable to cause egotism. So it's a sort of feeling of self importance, that arises from corporeal indulgence, as one might say, or consumerist indulgence. You get things and you identify with these things, and your ego is wrapped up with the acquisition of things and the avarice after things, and the fact that you have more things than your neighbor, for example, or more intellectual property than your neighbor, or even better ideas than your neighbor, or you're more moral, so you think, or more utopian, or more PC than your neighbor, or whatever. So quickly it becomes a sort of fantasy that you build around you, that you're more than other people, and your ego goes sort of insane at this point. Um, and then finally, we have the provoked side. The demons wish to provoke you. And out of that provocation arises fury. And one of the things about the whole matrix of the demon sphere is that people begin to become aware of it. That thought alone provokes people to fury, and one thinks of the fury of people like David Icke and Alex Jones and Peter Robbins, is it, and all these other people that think that have one word, which is conspiracy, and that makes them furiously angry with it all. Um, Either that fury is sort of burning slowly, or it's burning quickly as a sort of flare up of rage. And of course, it's on that fury that that the demons feed, and they have a great time with the conspiracy theorists, obviously, because the matrix is there, and they can provoke you, as indeed if they can provoke you to cultivate a reactive mind, as the Buddhists say, then they have great fun feeding off that, feeding off the subsequent depression and the subsequent fantasy and egotism and of course, all fueled by the fear. So all these elements come together to create the demon sphere. And the proposition, and indeed the fact, the truth that this world is not meant for you and me and for other sentient beings, but for them. It is their playground, it is their feeding ground. Um, and all this leads to an unfocusing of the mind, a forgetting, another one of the F demons, a forgetfulness of the truth and of God. And so what can be done about this? Well, actually, not a lot. So it's a matter really of how can the symptoms of living in the demon sphere, the fury, the forlornness, the frustration, the fickleness, etc., how can they be managed? How can the symptoms be managed so that you can get through life without becoming completely overwhelmed by fury, for example, which might lead you to do things, the consequences of which, again, feed the demons, give them exactly what they want, which is more food for their psychic power, for the accumulation of their psychic power, and power that they have over sentient beings, over you and over me. And so we come across this situation, and I've come to this sort of quasi syllogism of logic, I suppose. The four holy words, I love you, God, when all else fails, which it will do ultimately. I love you, God, and that's the sort of focus point on which to direct your attention. And God loves soul, and I am soul. But then it occurred to me that that's not enough to say I am soul. You have to say we are all soul. We are all souled, and that's something that humankind shares. It's the hue in the man, humankind, or the species itself. So whether you're male, female, trans, it doesn't matter what gender you are or what gender you think you are. You are soul. We are all soul. Um, and these are the sort of three holy words. We've gone from four holy words to three holy words. And love God, which would be another sort of two holy words, and then God would be one holy word, the single one remaining. And from a sort of contemplation of this sort of syllogism which I have here, a quasi syllogism, and an identification on the collective level with soul, and on the individual level as well. Um, so God, you love soul, and that soul is the I am, I am. And from this conclusion, or the remembering of this formula, this magical formula, as one might say, you can live a balanced life. So we move down to this figure here in the bottom left. You can appreciate and perceive the miracles that happen. Sometimes a miracle can be literally, well, anything can be a miraculous. It can be put into that category through your perception of it. It may be a few sort of sparks of light that you see before you sometimes, or something out of the corner of your eye, which is light filled. That can be miraculous. The miraculous acts as a sort of, they're signposts towards the transcendental, and to the transcendental Lord, who is the supreme object of your devotion and your love. And finally, and most importantly, of course, the cultivation of kindness. This world can be a very unkind world, but if you can cultivate kindness within your own corner, within your own family unit, or with your own neighborhood, or community, local community, then this is something that is possible within the demon sphere. So balance, kindness, and the miraculous are all possible and indeed inevitable, in one sense of the word, within the demon sphere that we live. And I suppose finally, there is a self-forgiveness arises out of this, because I am soul, but I am soul, you know, but I'm also all this lot. I am also the victim and the perpetrator. In other words, I am pointed towards this entire demon sphere matrix, which involves making people victims and perpetrators, and both at the same time, indeed, in a sort of confusing swirl of consciousness, of duality, one might say. And this is also who I am. So, mea culpa, we are all sinners. This is the nature of our sin, that we are provoked, we are fed upon, we are intimidated, we are indulged, we are uh, we are disenfranchised, in a sense, from our spiritual path or our spiritual inheritance. We forget, we become frustrated, or we are frustrated at every turn, and this is who I am as well. So you look at yourself in the mirror and you think, this is who I am, but also I am soul, or we are soul. You extend the I to include everybody, human, and indeed everybody in the sentient being sphere. Um, and uh, and this allows you, or in theory allows you, to lead a more balanced life, to cultivate kindness, to perceive the miraculous and be inspired by the miraculous. So I hope I've shown that Gnosticism itself, and I suppose the Gnostic, all this whole lecture or presentation is contained within the Holy Grail. One might say this is the Gnostic Grail of Gnosticism, the Grail of this sort of thought experiment, or this conscious process, or process of consciousness, enlightenment, as one might say, and it's overflowing with spirit, however you wish to define spirit. And so I hope I've shown that, that this is kind of the situation, but this is the nature of the prison, but it's also the nature of the liberation from this prison that we find soul in, and the quandary that we're in is resolved ultimately. and indeed inevitably through the action of the avatars of God or through Christ Jesus. And I hope I've shown that. I'm going to actually, as I say, really, really sign off. So I'm not going to be persuaded by my own ego as provoked by YouTube in producing 27 parts of this. No, this is really me leaving YouTube, because that will be an indulgence, that YouTube would like. They would like to indulge me on one hand, indulge my ego on one hand, and also restrict what I have to say on the other, which they do as well. And for that restriction, this is why I'm not making any more videos for YouTube. However, I'm going to sort of collect up all the data and material that I have accumulated over the past few years on this channel and elsewhere, and on my website as well. And I'm going to write a book called The Lord's Gospel, where I sort of try and make it a very, very simple sort of present all this in a very, very simple way, that everybody can understand. Because I think that the mark of real intelligence and genius is in fact simplicity. If you can create a very simple message out of complexity, a message which nonetheless is incredibly stalwart and incredibly strong, because it's adaptable, because your formula can apply to every situation or to most situations on a practical level, then I think that's genius. I think that's intelligence, is creating simplicity and durability, and even accountability, because your statements are actually accountable scientifically in relation to life experience. So that's what I hope to do with my Lord's Gospel, and dedicating it to the Lord whom I love, as I've stated here today. So thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much for being with me on this channel. And this is part 2 of No, this really is the last video I make on Gnosticism for YouTube. Really it is. There isn't going to be any more things after this apart from the book. So, keep a lookout for that. The Lord's Gospel, it's going to be called. It might come out someday.